This is Greek with David Hutchison. Review of the indicative mood. As we review the indicative mood today, I'm hoping that you will see that there are a lot of patterns and parallels between the various forms that we have already studied before. Try to see these parallels, these patterns, this big forest in the midst of the trees. So let's start with the present tense. This was the first form that we learned, the present active indicative. We have, for present active and for present middle passive, we have the stem. There's nothing before the stem. We do have connecting vowels, and then we have endings. So the pattern is stem, connecting vowels, endings. So the present active, we learned number one endings, and then on the present middle, present passive, we learned the number three endings. So let's look at this present active, luo, stem, connecting vowels, endings. Here are those number one endings, which are the primary active endings. O, ace, a, amen, ete, usi. Now remember, the connecting vowels are built in there. The connecting vowels are omicron before mu or nu, or epsilon before everything else. O, ace, a, amen, ete, usi. So this is what the present active indicative looks like. The stem plus number one endings. Stem, number one endings. And remember, those connecting vowels are built into the endings. Luo, luace, lue, luamen, luete, luusi. I loose, you loose, he, she, or it looses, we loose, you loose, they loose. Remember, you can also translate the present tense as action in progress, and that would be I am loosing. I loose is kind of a general statement. I am loosing is action in progress. So that was stem plus number one endings with the connecting vowels built in. Now let's look at the present, middle, and passive. This is stem plus connecting vowels plus endings. Same pattern, just different endings. These are the number three endings. My, aersai, tai, metha, ste, entai. My, aersai, tai, metha, ste, entai. These are called the primary, middle, and passive endings. So you have stem plus connecting vowel plus endings. Luamai, lue, luetai, luamatha, luisthe, luentai. If you translate it as a passive, I am being loosed, you are being loosed, he, she, or it is being loosed. We are being loosed, you are being loosed, they are being loosed. Now remember, on the middle we had several different options. The middle expresses special involvement of the subject in the action of the verb. So we could say, I am loosing myself, I am loosing for myself, or I myself am loosing. How are you going to know which one to do? Remember context. Try out the different options and see which one makes most sense in context. So remember, when we have a form that could be either middle or passive, it's a shared form. The only way you're going to know if it's middle or passive is by context, but specifically there are some clues and some things we can do to help us out. So first, we're going to try passive first, simply because there are more passives than middles in the New Testament. Remember also that a passive verb will often have an agency phrase telling us who done it. This is the hupa dia or in phrase. It tells us who is the agent performing that action of the verb. And remember that a passive verb will almost never have a direct object. So we're going to try passive first, simply because there's more passives than middles. Then if we see one of these agency phrases, a phrase beginning with hupa, dia, or in, then we're probably dealing with a passive verb. And if we see a direct object, it's probably a middle verb. So now let's look at the future tense. We learned the future tense pretty early on. The big key for future is this sigma. Sigma is a great key for the future tense. So what we had was the verb stem plus sigma, that future tense key. Notice it's in every single one of these columns, that sigma. We have connecting vowels, and then we have our endings. The number one endings you learned with the connecting vowels built in, o, a, se, amen, eti, usi. And then the number three endings, my, aer, si, tai, metha, ste, entai. So we've got stem, we've got sigma, that's a future tense key, and then we've got number one endings on the future active. So let's take a look. Luso, luses, luse, lusamen, lusite, lususi. We've got verb stem, we've got sigma right in the middle, and then we've got our number one endings. So the future tense says, I will loose. You will loose, he will loose. We will loose, you will loose, they will loose. So we had verb stem, then sigma, then number one endings. Let's look at the future middle. Now notice this doesn't say middle / passive. So what that means is this form is only middle. You have the verb stem plus sigma, same pattern as before. You've still got connecting vowels, and then all we're doing is we're switching to the number three endings. So we do a middle or passive ending. This turns out to be future middle indicative. And it looks like this. Lusamai, luse, lusatai, lusamatha, lusisthe, lusantai. So we have that verb stem, we have the sigma, then we have our number three endings. Connecting vowels are right in the middle. I will loose myself, I will loose for myself, or I myself will loose. That's how we would translate future, middle, indicative. So we see the patterns are very similar for future active and future middle. Very similar also with future passive. We're still dealing with the verb stem. The difference here is that theta eta jumps in on the future passive. The theta etas showed up with future passive and aorist passive. But then the other thing that we always have with future, you see it right here, is the sigma. So the future passive has theta eta plus sigma. Luthesomai. So we've got the verb stem, we've got theta eta plus sigma, we still have connecting vowels, and we still have number three endings. Luthesomai, luthese, luthesatai, luthesamatha, luthesiste, luthesantai. So you see that theta eta, it's either aorist passive or future passive. Then we see the sigma right after the theta eta, and you say, okay, this is future passive. Theta eta plus sigma, future passive. I will be loosed, you will be loosed, he will be loosed, we will be loosed, you will be loosed, they will be loosed. So that's the future passive. That's the verb stem, theta eta plus sigma, number three endings. Then there was a second future passive. Really the only deal here is that there's no theta. So instead of saying theta eta sigma, it's just eta sigma. So that's very similar to the future passive. There's just no theta. And it looks like this. Graphesomai, graphese, graphesetai, graphesamatha, graphesesthe, graphesantai. So there's no theta right before the eta, it's just eta. And then you still have the sigma, which is characteristic of the future tense. Translates the same way a future passive does. I will be written, you will be written, he will be written, and so forth. So let's look at this chart again. We've got verb stem, then we've got sigma is that great future tense key. We've got connecting vowels, then we have endings. Then on the future passive, we have theta eta right before the sigma, and then on the second future passive, we just have eta before the sigma. Now let's look at the imperfect tense. This is one of the past tenses. These are also called a secondary tense, a tense that has an augment. So notice before, when we did present and future, we didn't have anything that went in this column right here before the stem. Now we have an augment in the imperfect tense. The augment is a big sign that says past tense, past tense, past tense. So we're going to have an augment, then the verb stem, then we simply have connecting vowels and endings. So the imperfect form eluon. You've got augment right before. Augment says past tense, verb stem, connecting vowels and endings. These are the number 2 endings, called the secondary active. Nu, sigma, movable nu, min, te, nu or son. Nu, sigma, movable nu, min, te, nu or son. So here's the imperfect active. Eluon, elues, elue, eluamen, eluite, eluon. Augment before, verb stem, connecting vowels and endings. So the imperfect active would translate I was loosing. This is action in progress in the past tense. I was loosing. You were loosing, he was loosing. We, you, they were loosing. Action in progress, past tense. Now let's look at the imperfect middle or passive. So this says middle / passive. That means it's a shared form. This one form could be either middle or it could be passive. But look at the patterns. The patterns are the same as the imperfect active. We have an augment, then the verb stem, then we have connecting vowels and endings. So really the only thing that's different between these two forms is we switch number 2 endings for number 4 endings. Now remember the number 4 endings: main, sa, ta, metha, ste, inta. Main, sa, ta, metha, ste, inta. And it looks like this: eluamen, eluu, eluita, eluamatha, eluisthe, eluanta. So we have augment in front, verb stem, connecting vowels, number 4 endings: main, sa, ta, methisthe, inta. And just as you've seen many times before, that second singular form often switches up a little bit. But just look at the patterns: augment, verb stem, connecting vowels, number 4 endings. So if the form is passive, I was being loosed, action in progress, past tense, the subject is acted upon, passive. I was being loosed, you were being loosed, he, she, or it was being loosed, we were being loosed, you were being loosed, they were being loosed. Now what if it's middle? I was loosing myself. I was loosing for myself. I myself was loosing. Now remember, on these middles we said look the verb up in a lexicon, because sometimes the idea of self-involvement can be expressed without having to actually say the word myself. But these are three basic options. So let's look back at this pattern again. We have an augment before, then we have verb stem. Really the only thing that's going to be different between these two forms, the endings. Are they the number 2 endings? Are they the number 4 endings? We have secondary active endings, number 2, then it's active. We have secondary middle or passive, it's middle or passive. Now let's look at the aorist tense. The big key for aorist is sigma alpha. You see it on aorist active and aorist middle. The other big key that we'll sometimes have for second form, second aorist, is the stem change. You remember that, the stem change? So let's look at aorist active. Elusa. We have an augment before. That augment, remember, is a past tense morpheme. It's a unit of meaning that you stick on the front, and it says past tense. We just did another form that was also past tense. What was that form that we just studied a moment ago? The action in progress in past tense. That form was imperfect. Aorist is another past tense form. So we still have this augment. We have the verb stem lu. Then we have the sigma alpha, which is a giant aorist key. Then we have number 2 endings. Nu, sigma, movable nu, mente, nu, or son. We don't need connecting vowels because of the sigma alpha. So we can just stick those endings right after that alpha. All right, so let's look at the first aorist active. We've got augment on front. We've got the verb stem lu. We've got sigma alpha. This is the huge aorist key. And number 2 endings. Elusa, elusas, eluse, movable nu. Elusamen, elusite, eluson. So this is another past tense form. This is not action in progress. This is kind of the simple past tense. There's no particular comment about the kind of action. It's just action in the past, so you would say something like, I loosed, you loosed, he loosed, we, you, or they loosed. So we have this augment, sigma alpha is the big key, then the number 2 endings. Now the second aorist. Remember here the big key is this stem change. So augment, stem change, number 2. This is the second aorist active. We do have our connecting vowels showing up right in there. So this is what it looks like. Elipon, elipes, elipe, elipamen, elipite, elipon. So this has the stem change. The stem change is the big deal for second aorist. Notice at the very top, this is from the verb lepo, lambda, epsilon, iota, p, omega, lepo. It changes here to lip. So you have augment on front, stem change, lip, and then you've got connecting vowels and endings. There's no difference in translation than a first aorist. I left, you left, he, she, or it left. We, you, they left. So the big deal for second aorist is that stem change. Now let's look at the middle forms. Aorist middle, we still have augment on front. We have sigma alpha, this giant aorist key, the number 4 endings, and it looks like this. Elusamen, eluso, elusata, elusamatha, elusaste, elusanta. So we've got augment, past tense, sigma alpha, aorist, number 4 endings, aorist middle. How do you translate the aorist middle? I loosed myself, I loosed for myself, or I myself loosed. And once again, look up the verb in a lexicon. You may be able to express the idea of self-involvement without having to use the word myself. So that was aorist middle. Augment, verb stem, sigma alpha, number 4 endings. What's different between aorist active and aorist middle in terms of form? The patterns are exactly the same. It's just a difference in the endings. Are we dealing with number 2 endings or number 4 endings? Well, how about a second aorist middle? Second aorist middle, the big deal is going to be stem change plus number 4 endings. So notice, just like the second aorist active, we had stem change. Second aorist middle, we have stem change. Looks like this. Elipamen, elipu, elipita, elipamatha, elipisthe, elipanta. I left myself, I left for myself, I myself left. Okay, so here's aorist passive. We still have the augment. The big key here is this theta eta. So if you ever see augment theta eta, you know you're dealing with aorist passive. Eluthane, eluthes, eluthe, eluthemen, eluthete, elutheson. Augment theta eta, aorist passive. I was loosed. You were loosed. He was loosed. We, you, they were loosed. Now the second aorist passive. The big switch here is there's just no theta. Instead of theta eta, it's just eta. Otherwise, it looks exactly the same. So instead of theta eta, agrafthane, it's just eta. Agraphane, agraphes, agraphe, agraphemen, agrafete, agrapheson. And it's going to translate the same way as a aorist passive. I was written, you were written, he was written, we, you, they were written. So let's look again at this summary. For aorist, we have augment on front because it's a past tense. We've got sigma alpha after that. That's a big aorist key. If we don't have sigma alpha, then we're going to have a stem change for these second aorist forms. Then on the passive forms, we have theta eta, or second aorist passive, simply eta. Now let's take a look at the perfect tense. I always thought the perfect tense was easier to figure out because we've got two really good keys that will sometimes show up. We've got reduplication and kappa alpha. Reduplication, kappa alpha. These are great keys for perfect tense. So let's look at the perfect active. We've got both keys here. We've got reduplication, le, then we've got kappa alpha after the verb stem, and then we're going to use the number 2 endings modified just a little bit. So this is what the perfect active form looks like. Le luka, le lukas, le luke, le lukamen, le lukate, le lukasi. So we've got reduplication at front, kappa alpha after the verb stem, reduplication, kappa alpha, perfect. We'll often translate the perfect tense with have or has. So I have loosed, you have loosed, he, she, or it has loosed, we, you, they have loosed. Remember, the perfect tense often talks about an action that happened in the past whose results continue into the present. If an author chooses to use a perfect tense, it's really quite important. So perfect active, we had reduplication, kappa alpha. There's a second perfect. Really all that's different here is there's no kappa in the kappa alpha. So instead of reduplication kappa alpha, we just have reduplication alpha. But we still have reduplication, so that's a pretty big key. So here's the second perfect of grapho, gegrapha, gegraphos, gegraphe, gegraphamen, gegraphete, gegraphasi. Still have reduplication on the front. There's just no kappa. I have written, you have written, he, she, or it has written, we, you, they have written. So that's the second perfect active. Now let's look at the perfect middle or passive. We still have the same key of reduplication on the front, and then we're going to go with some middle passive endings. My, ersai, tai, methus, they, entai. Lelumai, lelusai, lelutai. Lelumatha, lelusthe, leluntai. Reduplication on front. Then we've got these number 3 endings, the primary, middle, or passive endings. So notice this says perfect middle / passive. That means it's a shared form. It could be middle, could be passive. If it's passive, we're going to translate it with have or has plus been loosed. I have been loosed. You have been loosed. He, she, or it has been loosed. We, you, they have been loosed. Perfect middle. We're going to do the same type of thing we've done many times before. I have loosed myself. I have loosed for myself. I myself have loosed. So the perfect tense, reduplication is a great key. Then sometimes we'll have kappa alpha or simply alpha. But you see reduplication, it's perfect. We also talked about the concept of deponency. A deponent verb is a verb that's middle or passive in form, but active in meaning. The vocab form, the lexical form, is an oh my form. If you memorize a vocab form and it's oh my, then you know it's a deponent. So it's going to look middle or passive, but you translate it as if it were active. Now, we mentioned that some people reject the category of deponency and think instead that these are just middle-only verbs. That's possible, but what you're going to do is translate these in an active sense. And really, if you want to know what the middle sense of that verb can be, just look it up in a lexicon. And that will help you out quite a bit with knowing how to translate these, whether they are in fact middle-only or whether they are really deponents. We also studied the verb me, the being verb. As you might imagine, this is very frequent. The present tense of me, esti, esmin, este, ac. I am, you are, he, she, or it is. We are, you are, they are. Me, esti, esmin, este, ac. So we had present tense. We don't say active because it's not an active verb, it's a being verb. So you would simply say present indicative. You don't say present active indicative, you just say present indicative. When you do the imperfect tense of me, it's the imperfect indicative. Amen, ace, ain, amen, ate, ason. Amen, ace, ain, amen, ate, ason. I was, you were, he, she, or it was. We were, you were, they were. And then we also learned the future tense. Esomai, esse, estai, esamatha, esesthe, esantai. I will be, you will be, he will be, we will be, you will be, they will be. There's a lot to the indicative mood, and even going back through this video, your head may be spinning a little bit. But what I want you to do is to just take the Goodyear blimp view, the Google Maps zoom out view and look at these patterns that you see. So look at those charts, look at the patterns that repeat themselves again and again. Print out copies of these patterns and you can keep them with you. And I hope that by looking at it from above, from this zoomed out view, you'll maybe see some patterns repeating themselves that you didn't notice before when you were in the midst of the forest. Remember that the Greek train always keeps moving. Wherever you are right now is always a bit hazy. And then as you look back to what you've done in the past, it starts to clear up a little bit. You're going to have delayed reaction aha moments. If you feel uncomfortable, that's par for the course. You just have to keep going. Things will start clicking if you keep working. If you give up, I can't help you, and you can't help yourself. But if you keep going, things will click, and you'll keep making progress. So let's kind of take a sanctification type of perspective on Greek. I have not already been made perfect, but I press on. I have not already obtained all this, but I press on. I'm not what I will be, but I'm not what I used to be. So let's do it. Let's press on. Let's keep fighting the good fight.